Thank you. Right. Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that very warm welcome. Good evening, Chester. That video said an awful lot, didn't it? You know, what it said is that 40 years ago we were taken in by a political class into something that was called, older heads may remember, a common market. Yeah, the idea was it was going to be about trade, friendship and cooperation, and 40 years on it's a political union, and we've got a flag. Not that I pay much allegiance to it, but we've got a flag, we've got an anthem, we've got a president who I made doubly well known across Europe with that speech. I should have been his PR man. We've got a police force, now they're building a European army, and we're living in a European state that now makes 75% of the laws in this country every year, costs us as a nation £55 million a day, and the time has come to simply say enough. We don't want any more. But of course what Mr. Cameron was doing in that video that you saw was the old trick of denying the British public the opportunity to have a say on the issue. Time and again, when Blair was in power, thank you, I was very worried the boos weren't coming, you know. Thank you, better, better. And of course working with Blair in those days was former European Commissioner Peter Mandelson. They're warming up, it's okay. We're going to be all right, the bar was open before. But we saw under the Blair years, you know, repeated promises, we'll give the British people a referendum on the Constitution, and then they ratted on the deal. But now, even though Mr. Cameron, as you saw in those clips, said repeatedly he did not want there to be a referendum, now by the end of 2017 there is going to be a referendum, and that would not have happened unless we'd stood up and taken on the political establishment. Is it warm enough? Now there is of course a precondition that before that referendum takes place, something very important has to happen. And indeed, the referendum is about, yes, it's about Britain's membership of the European Union, but equally, it's about the renegotiated deal. Isn't that exciting? I can see you all. You're very excited about it. Now, the Prime Minister, or Dave, as he prefers to be called, just to prove that he's got the common touch. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, what they were saying a few months ago was there had to be fundamental treaty change. Do you remember? That we had to be able to stop foreign migrants who come to Britain claiming benefits for at least 4 years. That struck me as being actually, I have to tell you, really rather sensible. We were told that the very concept of the free movement of people would be on the table. And the idea was given that actually we were going to go into a fundamental renegotiation. But believe me, after all my years in Brussels, the one thing I know is if you wish to gain concessions from the European Union, you will only do it by walking into the room and carrying a very, very big stick and showing through menace and grimace that if worse comes to worst, you intend to use it. It's what the French do every single time they want to get their way. The Irish actually have been really rather good at it. But the one country that is hopeless at it is our country. Because the Prime Minister, advised by a Foreign Office who care more for the interests of foreigners than they do for the interests of the people of this country, the Foreign Office have persuaded the Prime Minister that the best negotiating position is to go in saying, we don't want a stick, we'll cast it aside. That we'll go in saying, listen chaps. Well, that's what Odysonians say, you know. Listen chaps, whatever the results of this renegotiation, I will recommend Britain votes to stay a member of this political union. And just that very act shows you that this renegotiation is nothing more than a sham. There is nothing substantial on the table. We will not get a fundamentally different deal because our Prime Minister doesn't even have the courage to ask for it. No, they're talking about some sort of, promissory note being written into the next European treaties. Some promise that Britain will not be part of ever closer union. Some promise that Britain won't join the euro. Oh, and by the way, do you remember who was telling us we should join the euro? The very same people that are now saying we should remain part of the European Union. Yes, the Richard Bransons, the Tony Blairs, the Lord Mandelsons, the Ken Clarks, and Edwina Currie. I nearly forgot Edwina Currie. And you know what? They were wrong then, and they're wrong now. So what they're looking for these promises that Britain won't have to join the euro. But, there's no chance. There's no chance. More chance of me winning the 100 metres than there is of us joining the euro. It just isn't going to happen anyway. And what I can predict is that in about a year's time... Thank you. I hadn't planned the prop, but I'm pleased it was there. In about a year's time, they will reopen Croydon Airport. Some of you get it. Don't worry, you'll all catch up. It'll be okay. They'll reopen Croydon Airport, and Mr. Cameron, wearing a Homburg hat, will get out of a twin-prop engine, and he will say, I have in my hand... I have in my hand this piece of paper, which promises that Britain won't have to join the euro. Well, we never were going to anyway. That we're excluded from political union, and most important of all, and this is what the big sell will be, that we are to become associate members of the union. That is the game they intend to play. Mark my words, I know it. I've spent enough years inside those Brussels institutions to know how they play the game. But the effect of associate membership will be, yes, it's true, we're not part of the euro. Yes, it's true, we're not directly part of Schengen, thank goodness. But the effect of associate membership will be exactly the same as we are today, with a majority of our laws being made somewhere else, with membership of the club being far too expensive for any perceived benefit that it may give. And actually, what I'm going to advise the British people is do not accept pieces of paper or promissory notes from career politicians who do not give a damn about the independence and liberty and freedom of this nation. And as we head into this Sunday, Remembrance Sunday, when we remember all of those in conflicts over the last century that have given and sacrificed so much so that we and the rest of Europe could be free, independent peoples, we must say no. In fact, what this really comes down to isn't about a common market, isn't about a sham renegotiation, Actually, what this comes down to, ladies and gentlemen, is something that is wholly and completely fundamental. It is about which is your country? What do you recognise? And indeed, I ask you, let's have a little look, shall we? Let's have a look at a flag. Show me a flag. Now, there we are. Now, there's a flag, and I ask you, is this your flag? No. Louder. Is this your flag? Thank you. Would you pay allegiance to this flag? No. Would you don khaki and defend this flag? No. Thank you. Let me give you an alternative. Is this your flag? Yes. There we are. Well, it may seem very simple, but that, folks, at the end of the day, is what it is all about. The first lie is that it was a common market. The contemporary lie is that we're about to get an associate membership. We are members of a club whose laws supersede our laws. We are members of a club, whatever regulation or directive they pass, even if all 651 of our men and women in Westminster were to oppose it, they don't have the ability. We are members of a club whose courts in Luxembourg and in Strasbourg trump anything that our own Supreme Court decides. What we have done, or what has been done, no, not what we've done, because we haven't done it, but what has been done in our name is they have literally given away our country. They've literally given away our country. And our message is loud, simple, clear, and I believe absolutely right. Our message is, we want our country back. 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 Do you want your country back? Do you want your country back? We want our country back. And we want it back because it's the right thing to do. We want our country back because we believe in self-government, because we believe in ourselves as a nation, because we believe that democracy is better than bureaucracy and autocracy, and because we believe that the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves. And we want our country back because despite all the lies that have been given to us about economics, we believe that Britain would be better off economically running its own affairs. Think about this. Think about this. For the benefit of being a member of what is called the single market, we have to accept every single rule and regulation that comes from them. And I'm not just talking about straight cucumbers or bent bananas. Important for some, though these things are. But I'm talking about every single piece of employment legislation that says to our 5 million small men and women there is a big disincentive for taking on school leavers. I'm talking about health and safety at work, which in many cases has reached ludicrous levels. I'm talking about environmental law. And yes, we want to preserve the environment, but we also want to maintain a vibrant British manufacturing economy here in our country, and especially in the north of England. I'm talking about all of these things. All of these things. And yet, only 15%, 15% of the British economy is exports to the European market, and yet the rules for being members of the single market affect 100% of the British economy. I don't want to live in a bureaucratised, over-regulated marketplace. I want us to recognise we're living in a model global economy, not a European economy, and I want us to cast off the ties of excessive regulation and bureaucracy. I want us to get away from this corporate structure where the big multinationals work hand in glove with people in the European Commission to make a rule book that discriminates against small and medium-sized businesses. And I want Britain's small businessmen and women to be freed from this nonsense and to get on doing what they're good at, making money, employing people, paying their taxes and making this a better country. And when it comes to trade, global trade, we're told by every big party political leader, from Cameron to, well, Corbyn, I'm not so sure about Corbyn, but he's far too busy having tea with the IRA to worry about things like this, you know. Oh, and of course, his proposals to abolish the Queen, to give the Falkland Islands to Argentina, to abolish the British Army. Gosh, I could go on. I thought in the north of England, sort of Corbyn homeland, but there we are. But we're told by all the big party political leaders, and we have been for years, that only by being part of this big European club can we, on the global stage, have clout. Are we strong enough to negotiate the kind of trade deals that we need? And I saw this face to face last year when Nick Clegg, well, they were a big party once, you know, but when good old Cleggers challenged me to these 2 one-hour debates. And I must say I'm enormously grateful to Nick for doing that. And as somebody said, it's a bit like going up to the hardest guy in the local boozer and saying, "I'll see you outside, son." You know. But it was really interesting, because there was a moment in that debate and the global trade issue came up and Clegg came out with a standard line. He said, "We're not big enough. We haven't got clout on the world stage. Nobody would ever listen to us. We have to be part of this big European club to negotiate our trade deals." And I replied by saying, "Nick, this is nonsense. Switzerland, who negotiates her own free trade deals, has more free trade deals globally than we do." I said, "And Iceland, with a population of just over 300,000, has just negotiated her own trade deal with China." I said, "Nick, if Iceland is big enough to negotiate trade deals, I'm damn certain that we in the UK are big enough to negotiate our own trade deals." But that wasn't really the point, because I realised in that instant, if I hadn't realised it before, and I said it, I said, "Nick, what you're really saying is that you don't think we're good enough." And you know what, folks? Ever since the early 1960s, ever since post-Suez, after that huge national humiliation that Britain suffered, you know, a country that had run the biggest empire in the world, a country that had stood twice for the side of right in those wars and been bankrupted through doing so, but a country who at Suez suffered a terrible, terrible shock. And the realisation that we weren't a superpower, and the understanding that the empire was going. And the response from Macmillan and everybody since, virtually everybody since, has been, we're not good enough. We're not capable. We're not fit to run our own country, to make our own laws. We're not, good enough to negotiate trade deals or control our borders. We have to consign all of that to the dustbin of history and sign up to a bigger European club who will do it on our behalf and do it better than we can. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is absolutely at the heart of what this referendum is all about and why we need to say no, because I believe, and I hope you believe, and because I believe in Britain, we are big enough, and we are good enough, and we are strong enough, and we must run our own country. Seems to work. And crucially, one of the key parts of running your own country is being able to control your own borders. To be able to decide who comes to live, work and settle in your country. Indeed, over 200 countries in the world have those rules. Over 200 countries in the world wouldn't let any of you in. I mind you looking at you, but anyway. But they wouldn't let any of you in unless you passed some simple, basic tests. And yet, we've given all that up. We're now part of a European Union that encourages the free movement of people. We're part of a European Union that says we're all the same. So we should all have access to health benefits, the education system, or whatever else it may be. Now, there is no subject on which I have been more pilloried over the course of the last 10 years than this question of open-door immigration. And the reason is that in 2004, we let in 8 former communist countries. Countries where the Berlin Wall had fallen in 1990, and by the way, wasn't that a wonderful thing to see centralised big government blowing up in smoke? I hope we can repeat it fairly shortly. But we allowed in 8 former countries, and then 2 others came in, Romania and Bulgaria, countries in which their minimum wage is 10% of what our minimum wage is. And what I said in 2004 is you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out what will happen if you tell people in poor countries they can come and live in rich countries. I said there would be and live in rich countries. I said there would be a massive population flow to the United Kingdom. And they called me all the names under the sun. But I was right, wasn't I? Yeah. I was right. I was right. And that doesn't mean that there aren't some fantastically good people that want to come to Britain from Bulgaria or Poland or wherever else it may be. But what it's meant is that the flow of people has been so great. Indeed, net migration into Britain is now running at 1/3 a year, compared to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, until one Tony Blair came to power. God, you love Blair here, don't you? But for that 50 years, net migration ran at 30,000 a year. It is now running at 10 times that number. And so keen are the British government, as members of the EU, to have an open door to unskilled migrant labour from southern and eastern Europe that we now exclude engineers from India or doctors from New Zealand. We must be off our rocker. Off our rocker. So to be clear and to brush away any doubts some of you may have, I am not anti-immigration, but I am pro-controlled immigration. I think the numbers coming into Britain need to be hugely and drastically reduced. Our education system, our health system, our transport system cannot cope with a population rising by these numbers. But let's be selective. Let's be grown up. Let's be sensible. Let's play our part in the world. Let's have an Australian-style point system where we can choose. And that works. And that works. We'll have people who come to Britain who've got trades and skills to bring that can better our society. We won't take people into this country who don't bring their own private medical provision. And we will say, as the Australians say, breaking their own traditions, that we won't take foreign criminals. All right? So let's get this right. But, ladies and gentlemen, we can't do that as members of the European Union. Our British passport, the first two words on it say European Union. I don't want that passport. I want a British passport. I want us to control our borders and not have a free-for-all for 500 million people from the rest of Europe. Now, that problem just got a whole lot worse because of what we're seeing coming across the Mediterranean and through the Balkans every single day. Can I just show you what I said 9 days before the general election of this year in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, only to be completely ignored by the British media? Just look at what I said a few months ago. Temperature's unbearable.
4 years ago, I stood here and said that bombing Libya would be a huge mistake. The UK Parliament and this Parliament were desperate with the power to go to war. And so now we have a failed state in Libya, which is now a conflict being used for criminal trafficking gangs to bring people to Europe. We are guilty for this crisis. We are directly guilty for the drownings that are going on. I am not blind to the human suffering that we've caused in many of these countries. I would call on this Parliament, this Commission, to end the barriers to trade, to stop the fisheries policy, to ask the United Nations to get involved and to try and help. But the real question we face is, what are we to do? Are we to go down the Australian system in dealing with this crisis? And indeed, the Australian Premier, Tony Abbott, has offered us his advice and help. Australia face this, and Australia not only have stopped the boats from coming, they've stopped people from drowning. But no, we're not interested in what the Australians have done. We have decided that we can deal with this on our own. So we've decided that people can come, and that people won't be sent back. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is this. The definitions for who qualifies for asylum are so wide, they include not just people coming from war, not just people coming from failed states. Mr. Juncker this morning seemed to suggest that perhaps it would even include people who were fleeing poverty. I'm sorry, we simply can't accept countless millions. There is a real and genuine threat. When ISIS say they want to flood our continent with 500,000 Islamic extremists, they mean it. And there is nothing in this document that will stop those people from coming. Indeed, I fear we face a direct threat to our civilization if we allow large numbers of people from that war-torn region into Europe. I promise my party will stand up to this impending disaster for all concerned.
Thank you. I tried to make that part of the general election debate in this country. I was roundly and routinely ignored. Nobody wanted to talk about it. But folks, it is happening. In the next speech I gave after that in May, I said I feared an exodus of biblical proportions. And indeed, that is what is happening. And actually, folks, most of those that are coming are not refugees. They're not refugees. They're not people fleeing in fear of their lives because of their religion or their race or their class. They're people getting out of countries, yes, not countries I accept, that I would want to live in. But they are basically economic migrants seeking a better life. But they are people coming from very, very different cultures. And so bad has this crisis now become that Angela Merkel, the leader of Europe, oh, sorry, Germany, well, that Angela Merkel, after her catastrophic call in July, when she said, would please as many people come as possibly can, that led to that stampede, what she has now done is allowed herself to be blackmailed by a reinvigorated Turkish government. Not only are we now going to pay the Turks billions to look after people who've been displaced by war, a policy actually I haven't of itself got a problem with. But we're now going to give visa-free access from the middle of next year to 75 million Turks, and we're promised from Frau Merkel, I didn't say the smiling Frau Merkel, did I? Because she never is. She's deadly serious. She's so deadly serious, she frightens the life out of me. Because what she's now said is that she was going to fast-track Turkey's application to become a full member of the European Union. And do you know who her biggest supporter is? A man who has campaigned for 10 years for Turkey to join the European Union, the British Prime Minister, David Cameron. If we vote to remain in the European Union in this referendum, we are voting for a European Union that will include Turkey. We are voting for a European Union that will let in a country 95% of whose landmass is actually in Asia and not in Europe. We'll be voting for the free movement of people to a country even poorer than Romania and Bulgaria, who we let in before. And we'll be voting for the unlimited, untrammeled, free movement of people into our country from people who come from an entirely different culture. How on earth can we go on as a nation taking a net 1/3 every year of people from different backgrounds who do not speak our language and expect there to be integration and harmony in Chester or Manchester or London or anywhere else? If ever there was a warning, it is what is going on in the Mediterranean. It is what is going on with the possible Turkish accession. And just yesterday, the European Commission said they expect the numbers of migrants coming into Europe next year to be another 3 million people. And we're told that leaving the European Union, that taking back control of our lives is the risky option. Ladies and gentlemen, I put it to you that being governed by these incompetents in Brussels, being governed by people we can't vote for and we can't remove, being governed by people who introduced the euro, which has led to such misery in the Mediterranean, being governed by people who have taken out a cork from a champagne bottle by saying, please everybody come, and even if they wanted to, can't possibly put it back. It is far riskier for us economically, democratically, and indeed demographically for us to remain members of this union. This referendum is one that our career political class never wanted. This referendum came about because of grassroots campaigners that you see on this platform. This referendum, ladies and gentlemen, is the single most important political decision that you will make in your lifetimes. This referendum this referendum is about our very being, our very soul. It's about who we are as a nation. It's about what we intend to hand down to our children and grandchildren. And it is about righting a wrong. Not a wrong caused in Brussels, but a wrong caused in Westminster. A wrong caused by politicians who have lied to us consistently over 40 years ago, as they've sold out our nation. This referendum is about us saying clearly, we want our country back. And I hope you'll join me in making that happen. Thank you. You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.